Hey everybody, it's Dr. Jeff. Welcome to the Dr. Jeff Show. Today I am interviewing Sam Sorbo. You've seen Sam Sorbo in television shows and in movies as an actress, but she is also a film producer with several highly successful films that she's put together, and an author, and a mom and wife to Kevin Sorbo. This is a lady who speaks what she really thinks, and right now she has some thoughts for us on how to understand the words that are being used to propagandize us in our own time. Get ready, hold on tight, because Sam holds nothing back. Let's join her for the Dr. Jeff Show now. Sam Sorbo, it's great to see you. I'm so glad that you could join us today on the Dr. Jeff Show.
Thank you. It's great to be here with you.
Now, you've had great success as a model and as an actor and as an author and as a film producer. And you, more than just about anybody else I know, use your platform to speak out on a lot of key issues. So we're going to have a conversation that's just going to range all over the place about what's really going on in our society today. But before we get to that, I wanted to just talk a little bit about your career and your family a little bit. I'd love to hear your story about how you got into the acting and modeling business, because you started out as a biomedical engineer. That's not the normal career trajectory.
It was an odd career path. I'll grant you that. I was discouraged from pursuing acting all through high school. I was tall, so I never got the juicy roles because the boys were all shorter than me. And of course, the people teaching in the high school were unsuccessful actors, because if you're a successful actor, you're not teaching in a high school typically. And so they offered nothing but discouragement for anybody to pursue a career in acting. And so my choices were quite limited. I was an academic anyway, so I went to school for biomedical engineering, and I started modeling because I was very successful, and I started it opened my eyes, and I understood that possibility was out there, that I didn't have to be beholden to whatever the narrative was that the school professors were telling me. And that's when I just decided that I could pursue acting if I wanted to, and, let the chips fall where they may. And so that's what I did.
Mm. Now you've done a lot of acting in movies and television, a lot of shows that people have seen. They've seen you in these programs, and they've seen your husband, Kevin, too. A lot of people who are watching this show are familiar with the movie God's Not Dead, and Kevin played the evil Professor Radisson in that show. So this is a family pursuit.
Oh, well, it is. A few years back, we actually produced a movie called Let There Be Light that I co-wrote with another writer. And so through that movie, it did become very much a family endeavor. I was always there, very supportive of Kevin and helping out behind the scenes. But then with Let There Be Light, I took a major leading role, not just in the movie, but for the movie as the producer. And it became very much. So we are now a family that produces family entertainment for families.
Yeah.
And frankly, I think that's as it should be. I think that in our culture, we've lost the value of the family. We've degraded the importance of the family itself. And of course, God tells us that that's the first level of government, is the family. And so, Kevin and I just saw that there's a need in the culture for this and for uplifting and inspirational content. And so that's what we seek to do in our movies.
So you're giving hope in movies like that. And Let There Be Light was a very successful film. And you've had a lot of successful films. And I wanted to hear a little bit about, the basis of all of this is your faith in God and in Jesus. And I'm just curious at what point along the way were you drawn to thinking about God and to the possibility that Jesus really is the way, the truth, and the life?
Well, I I went on a journey in my late teens, early 20s because I had grown up with a lot of fear. I was not raised with very much religion. And so when I hit my stride and I had a career and I was supporting myself because I was successful, I sort of I hit a spiritual wall, and I was like, wow, is this it? This is all there is? 'Cause this is what I was worried about. I mean, I got this in the bag. I'm fine. So now what? And so I went on a journey to discover the meaning of life, if you will. I discovered God, and it wasn't long after that before I found Jesus. He was hiding right behind him. No. So, so yes, it's a very personal thing when you give your life to Christ. But more than that, I love the truth. It's very important to me. And I'm very frustrated with what I'm seeing happen in our society today, where we are cogently and willfully denying the truth. Now, you can argue with gravity all day long, but at the end of that day, if you jump off a 27-story building, you will be injured because gravity will win, because the truth is the truth and it's immutable. And we have a culture that's telling us today that the truth is changeable, that, the truth belongs to you, but the other truth belongs to me. And I have my truth and you have your truth. And there is no such thing as abject truth. And it used to be that education sought to teach truth, beauty, and goodness, three knowable things. Now our education system seeks to teach that those three knowable things are unknowable. And that's a very dangerous place. And that's why I wrote my book, Words for Warriors, which just came out actually. And I'll tell you, the book is dedicated to the Word, because in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And so we can't allow the left to take our language, pervert it, and use it against us in lies and deceit, because it is actually an attack against God and the truth when they do that.
So you've got this big battle that we're facing in a culture. On the one side, truth can be known, and it is known not just as a mathematical formula or set of propositions, but as a person, as Jesus. And then on the other side, you have people say the truth cannot be known, at least truth in the sense of true truth, that I speak my truth and I have my truth, and my story is what makes it's true because it's mine rather than because
it's true for me. But that's absurd. And we know that that's absurd. We know it intrinsically, right? But I love the way that you phrased it, that the truth is knowable, and it's actually knowable in human form as Jesus. And so what are they doing? They're denying Jesus. That's all. Like it's very, very simple. The other thing that they're doing is they're deplatforming people right now, right?
Right.
They're canceling people. And part of the way that they do that is through political correctness, which is perverting words. Again, it's fascism with words. You may say this, you may not say that. The genius of this nation is that our founding fathers said, hey, we need to just protect the right of anybody to think and speak freely.
Yes.
That they thought that was important enough to codify is, I'm struck by it almost daily, just the idea how clever they were, because they saw this coming. But now we're fighting a war on the level of communication, on the level of the ability to communicate. Now, think about this for a minute. What is the thing that we always go to avoid war? They always call for diplomacy. Mm-hmm. Let's try diplomacy. What is diplomacy? It's conversation with words.
Yeah.
So the left is actually trying to stifle conversation, silence people, not have an exchange of ideas, not have any diplomacy. Why? Because the left loves violence. They know that violence will ensue. You can disagree, but you will either be silenced or there will be violence. You see?
And that's kind of the point. We talk a lot on this show about a Marxist worldview that's based on the dialectic, that you have to divide people into groups and have them fight one another, because that's the way history advances. So if somebody from that worldview, if you say, well, why don't we debate this? Or why don't we sit down and have a dialogue? The answer will always be, no, I don't have a dialogue with you, because this is not about truth. It's about power. And if I even give you the opportunity to speak, then I am diminishing my own power. So my goal is to make you be quiet rather than to persuade you. Is that
well? I agree with that. And I'll just add that I can't let you speak because your truth negates my lie. The left is constantly screaming for tolerance, right? You have to tolerate this. Why are you so intolerant? It's not me that's intolerant. It's the truth. The truth is the least tolerant thing we have. 2 plus 2 is, was, will always be, will only ever be 4. You can try to say it's 5 and say, you have to tolerate my belief that it's 5. And I'll say, okay, but don't build any bridges.
Right.
And I can afford you grace, but tolerance when you're confronting the truth? No, there's no tolerance. The truth is the truth, and the lie will not stand. So the left doesn't want conversation, not because it's an assault on their power. I mean, it is, but they don't want the conversation because their lies cannot stand in the sunlight of truth.
Yeah. Yeah. And truth is, like, as you mentioned, there's a good analogy to the physical world. You don't break the law of gravity. You can only prove it, right? You don't, if you jump,
that's very good. Yes.
You jump off that building and you are going to go down, no matter even if you have a very good upness story that you're telling yourself, you're going down. But
I believe I can fly. And it's funny because even airplanes prove gravity.
Right. Yes. Now make the link between that natural law idea of gravity, because that's obviously something people understand, to the idea of truth as knowable. And because I think you do this in your book, and I just want to hear you articulate it.
So we have metaphysical laws. I'm not sure how I could go about doing that for you right now. We have physical laws and we have metaphysical laws. There are laws that are immutable. And one of them is truth. And here's the thing, everybody knows it's the truth. So C.S. Lewis talks about it in his book, Mere Christianity. And, he was a latecomer to the belief, but what he realized, and one way that we can know that it exists is, or that God exists, is that everybody has this idea of fair. Fair doesn't evolve. It's not an evolutionary idea. It makes no sense because evolution says survival of the fittest. Fair says be kind to others because you want them to be kind to you, or just because, right? Because if he gets a sucker, then I want a sucker for me because that's fair. And so in that sense, you probably could make the case that there is a truth, but I struggle with that because it's so self-evidentiary.
Yes. So you realize, oh, well, I can give examples of it. And that's really that's what philosophers do. Like they'll say, okay, people who say there is no truth still say things ought to be this way or things ought to be that way. The very idea of oughtness indicates to us that justice, as an example, is not something that we just make up if we get power. It is something that we are discerning to be true of the way the world is, the way God created it.
Right. Well, when people say there is no absolute truth, you say, is that true absolutely?
Right. Truth emerges.
Right. So therefore, there must be an absolute truth, because you can't absolutely say there is no absolute truth, because then that would be an absolute truth. Therefore, there is absolute truth. I mean, but that's sort of semantics, and I gotcha. And I don't know how successful I find it successful because I have fun with things like that. So maybe maybe that would appeal to somebody else, I suppose.
I think it's super important to understand that anybody who makes a moral comment of any kind has to be able to give the basis for it. On what basis do you say that? If it's just your preference or your feelings, then why are you saying that it has to be binding on me? And so,
Right.
But I want to talk about words a little bit more. I find this fascinating. I majored in communication, or it's one of my part of a double major. And so I enjoyed that immensely. And one of the things I learned is that when words refer to things, so words aren't the truth that they're describing, that they can refer accurately to it. When you separate words from the possibility of truth, the resulting word games are destructive. For example, in Rwanda, the Hutu began to get on the radio and call the Tutsi tribe cockroaches, right? They dehumanized them. They used words without any reference to the truth, created an impression that there was a new reality in which Tutsi lives were not valued, and hundreds of thousands of people were killed. Okay. The Nazis did the same thing. They called Jews vermin, dehumanized them. And this is super timely for us because pro-abortion advocates do the same thing, right? They dehumanize the unborn by calling them products of conception or fetal tissue. Whenever words are used, or whenever somebody's going to be the target of oppression, the first thing the enemy does is diminish their humanity using words without any reference to the truth. Have I got that about right?
I wholeheartedly agree. In fact, it proves the rule that as a general rule, human beings identify with each other and we empathize with each other. And we have that sense of fairness, that God-shaped hole that we all have in our hearts. And so the only way to overcome that is to make people believe they are other. And if you can convince people they are other, which is not true, there's no basis in truth because we know intrinsically they are same, then you can have power over other people and bad things happen. Gina Carano, I know this is airing a little bit later, but Gina Carano just tweeted that the Nazis, it wasn't the Nazi soldiers who were beating people in the streets. It was beating Jews in the streets. It was their own neighbors.
Yes.
And the only way that they managed to do that and that the Nazis would then be successful at literally marching your neighbor past your apartment building, down the stairs, the only reason that they were successful is because they had managed to run a campaign convincing the German public of the otherness of the Jews, that they weren't human. And so it wasn't valuable enough to many Germans. And by the way, there was a lot of intimidation also. It wasn't valuable enough to them to try to save their Jewish neighbors. Right. In fact, the campaign was so effective, and Gina Carano tweeted about this, that it was the neighbors who went after them in the streets and beat them and attacked them, even the children, because they were very good at training the children. So she likened it, she said, this is sort of the problem that we're having today with demonizing people because of their political beliefs, which is what's happening. Here's what I find so fascinating. The response to her was to silence her. Basically, she lost her job. Disney fired her. Obviously this is airing in a bit, so I don't know how this whole thing plays out, but Disney fired her. The mob went after her. There are a number of people who are going to her defense. The left is incensed by it. Why? Because they know that they're the ones who are doing the Nazi type behavior. They know it.
Yeah.
Because there is a truth, right?
Yeah.
So in this whole process, they're actually making her point for her. In fact, I just tweeted that. I said, so your response is to cancel her, right? Okay. Like, do you see how much of a Nazi you just became? I'm just saying you're imitating somebody and it's not the Jews in this scenario.
Wow. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. What happens when life is so crazy that irony doesn't even make sense anymore, right?
yeah, they don't even
No.
see it. They
Oh,
called Trump Hitler for 4 years,
yeah.
for
Right.
4 years, and they don't see that
Wow.
their behavior. And that's partly why I wrote the book. So, the word fascist, that was really the touch point for me. The flashpoint was this idea that even Jordan Peterson thinks that fascism is a right wing idea. Oh, I struggle with that because he aims to be so intellectually honest and he succeeds on so many levels, and yet he thinks that there are right wingers who seek some sort of totalitarianism, and nothing could be farther from the truth. Fascism is very much left wing. They have everything in common with the communists, the socialists, the Marxists. They have the same artwork. They have the same coloring, red and black. They have the same tactics, the government overreach tactics that are employed by the communists, the Marxists, the socialists. And yet somehow we've allowed that word to be perverted enough that you somehow think that it's right wing. No, liberal fascism, political correctness is fascism of speech. That's not the conservatives that are doing that. That's the liberals that are enacting that. They love it. They are the fascists. The Antifa movement is somehow supposed to be anti-fascist. They're the most fascist of all. Their behavior is exceedingly fascist. And so fascism is now a word that it applies to the right wing and the bad things that those people do, which is nothing basically, because they don't do bad things. By and large, they don't do bad things. I'm sorry, I have to say this because fascism is the totalitarian left wing. Okay. And so it just sort of flipped a gasket or something. And I was like, okay, what other words have they done this to? Because it's a complete miscommunication, misunderstanding. And what they've managed to do is brand the right so that people don't even want to be affiliated with those Nazi fascists. The Nazis were socialists.
Right.
And then they say, "Oh, well, I'm a democratic socialist." There's no such thing. Sit down and shut up because you don't know what you're talking about. Forgive
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
language, but
So,
it gets so frustrating because there is a truth and you're not even close to it. And so I wrote the book, and at the same time, there are a bunch of words that have just cropped up over the years as well that I felt I needed to put in there. So especially during COVID, there's a ton. The word that comes after fascism in the book is feargasm, which is a term that was coined by Ted Nugent to talk about the fear mongers who are just really enjoying all the fear that they're provoking and stoking. Right?
yeah. Yeah. Give us some sense of what to do, because understanding truth, knowing that words are meaningful and that they refer to real things, even if paid propagandists are telling you, misusing them. How do people clear away all of this stuff in their everyday lives and get to a sense of what's really true?
Well, to get to the truth, you have to investigate, and I'd say prayer should enter into there somewhere. And it is hard to know the truth because we have a leftist culture now. The culture is distinctly left that advocates for the lie and willfully, I should say, disparages and demonizes and disguises and discards the truth. So they're trying to discard Gina Carano. They just deplatformed Kevin, my husband, on Facebook. He's got over 500,000 followers, people who enjoy his posts. No, you're not allowed to enjoy those anymore. That's fascism. That's political. That's, Facebook fascism.
Yeah.
So in order to battle through all of that, well, first I would say get a copy of my book.
Yep.
Get a second copy for your friend, and really start educating yourself. And part of that comes also, forgive me, but I have to comment that if you have gone to public school, you probably haven't been exposed to a whole bunch of truth. which means that you have to question sort of everything about your life.
Mm-hmm.
So think about the people who grew up under the USSR in communist and Soviet Russia. Think about them at the end of the Cold War. Think about the East Germans, for instance, when the wall came down and they were allowed out, when they were told that the wall was to keep out the capitalists because they all wanted to get to the workers' paradise. And then the wall comes down and these people walk outside into West Germany and they are shocked that they can't just go pick a car and leave with it because they see all the cars. They've never seen the cars before in the store. They've never seen the shelves stocked so high, but they actually have to pay for it. There's a whole other, it's a complete different paradigm. And I would say that people, I went through it when I started homeschooling and as I grew as a home educator to understand that we have not been educated in our public schools. We've been schooled, and it's a completely different thing.
Yes.
And so, for instance, if when the COVID crisis came, you agreed with 2 weeks to flatten the curve because that seemed scientific, and they did seem to know what they were doing. And it was a very scary time because 2.2 million deaths were forecast. But then when they switched it to slow the spread, and you didn't ask a question because you just believed that whoever was in charge knew what they were doing, teacher knows best. Don't question. Don't disrupt the class. By the way, you always have to ask permission to ask a question. So we are conditioned to not ask questions. We're conditioned to make sure that we never make mistakes. We're conditioned to think that we don't know anything that we haven't been formally instructed in, which is, of course, ridiculous. We have the internet. We can know anything that we want at any given time. We can seek it out and search it out. Nobody asked, slow the spread. Wait a minute. Why slow the spread? Why not speed the spread? Maybe slowing the spread is just going to prolong the misery. Maybe speeding the spread is what we want to do. I'm just saying, and I don't necessarily have the answer. I'm just saying nobody asked the question.
Yeah.
So we're in a bad place. We have a long way to go. The first part is to realize that we have this problem. That's why I wrote the book. We have a problem. Houston, we have a communication problem. When the left says something, just here's the thing. The Democrats have gone so far left that they are now fully Marxist left wing. That means that they lie. Basically, they lie. So we have to figure out when to take people at their words and when to not believe them. And that's tough for us because we believe in truth. We believe in the sameness, that we are all linked together and we have the same values. The Democrats don't have our values. They espouse partial birth abortion. They espouse late-term abortion. They espouse post-birth abortion. They had no problem with Cuomo sending elderly people into nursing homes with COVID. They literally applauded him. He became the darling of the media despite having done this horrendous thing. And so we have to wrap our heads around that and go, okay, so we're not dealing with the same people on the other side. We're dealing with the enemy.
Yeah. How do we, okay, here's a person who might be listening to this. And at Summit Ministries, we're focused on this rising generation, equipping them to embrace God's truth, champion a biblical worldview. A lot of them are in their 20s now. A lot of them have been very successful in getting good jobs and good companies. And they're having conversations like this around the water cooler with people who are totally opposite in their worldview. What could you just speak to them for a minute, Sam, to just give them some kind of encouragement about what to do and how to do it? Because obviously their job is on the line as well as everything else.
Yeah. So the encouragement that I would offer is to understand that if you stay in the truth, you will have a more peaceful life. If you start bending to the lie, you will have a burden on your shoulders. And that's a difficult thing to outrun or outmaneuver because it weighs on you. So you have to find ways of standing in the truth that whereby you can maybe convince other people of the truth. And there are gentle ways of doing that. There are ways of just asking questions. I know people who are out in the crowd, and they sort of go around with a bit of a naivete, asking questions that provoke people to think, like I just did. Why slow the spread? Why not speed the spread?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a serious question.
Yeah.
Sweden didn't shut down at all. And supposedly they got through COVID. They did have a number of deaths. They never hit the number of deaths that were ever predicted, not even close. But they got through it with no mandates and only encouragement to social distance and, protect yourself, kind of a thing. So we have to learn, and it can be fun. You can have fun with what question could I ask the person so that it would put them in a position of justifying the lie. And that's what we need to do. We need to put them in a position of justifying the lie. Part of the reason that we're in the place that we are is the media has never asked the left to justify their lies, or we would have had inquiries. Look, the president of the United States, or the former president of the United States, is being impeached for quote unquote inciting violence. Okay. The left, the politicians from the politicians on down, incited violence all summer long.
Right.
Encouraged it, invited it, made it accessible, all summer long. No one's being held to account there.
Yeah.
So if we could hold people accountable, and one way to do that is to just gently ask questions. So I was at lunch the other day, and the one guy at the table was sort of trying to insist that it's very important to always put your mask on. And his son got up to go to the restroom, and he said, "Don't forget your mask." And then he brought it up again because I didn't wear my mask, and I don't wear a mask because I've done research, and I've seen the research that actually some research is now showing that masks are transmitting the disease. So I try not to wear the mask, and he kind of lit into me a little bit more. And what had happened was I had shown up not wearing a mask. They'd all gotten up from the table. We were going to change tables. We walked over to the other table. We stood around for a while. Then we decided to go back. And I said to him, yeah, I agree that, some people think the masks are very important. And you obviously think that, except that when we got up, walked over to the other table, stood around for a while, and then came back for those 5 minutes, you didn't bother putting your mask on. So now I don't know what to think about you.
Huh. Just by planting that seed.
I'm just wondering, how devoted are you to the mask that you didn't put your mask on when you seem to be very, that you think that it's very important that you put your mask on, but you didn't. And of course, this is the big problem that we have, is that the left, these governors who are issuing mandates now, and now Pritzker is getting sued because a young man committed suicide. Sadly, very sadly, I should say. It's a terrible story. But they're just issuing edicts. They are not scientists. They're not economists. They're politicians. They are not hired to issue mandates. And yet they are. And, they ought to be held accountable. But Governor Newsom in California, he issued the mandate. And then the next week, he was just out violating all of the things of the mandate.
Yeah.
And who's holding him accountable? Well, now they're starting a recall. So now that they're starting a recall, now he's lifting the mandates. Oh, you know what? You can do this. And oh, you can do that now. Trying to make nice with people. Oh, the manicurists can open. There was never any reason for them not to be open.
Right.
And people ought to be more upset about this, because livelihoods, whole lives are being destroyed. In Italy, we had the Italian restaurants all banded together. They weren't allowed to open. They banded together. They said, let us open. We will open on this day. And they did. And the government came out and said, Mav, what are we going to do? We cannot arrest everyone. And so they didn't. So now the restaurants are open.
Wow. So people had to come to an understanding of, hey, we have power here. We don't have to submit.
There's power in the truth.
This. Yeah. We've got to wrap up our discussion, but the book is Words for Warriors. And in the book, you're making a point that I think is, I remember Michael Bauman, the late professor at Hillsdale College, would always tell our students at Summit Ministries, when words lose their meaning, people lose their lives. So we got to understand what the words are and learn the new vocabulary, but then also learn how to speak words of truth.
You know, I've unpacked that so much. Did I unpack that for you here? When words lose their meaning, people lose their lives. Did I make that connection for you? Because it's so important.
Yeah, I think you did. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
good.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the conversation, Sam. Really appreciate your being on the Dr. Jeff Show. Once again, thank you for joining us for the Dr. Jeff Show today. So grateful to have Sam Sorbo on the program. You can find the book that she talked about in the program, Words for Warriors, wherever books are available for sale. If you want to follow Sam's work on Twitter, it's just at the Sam Sorbo, Instagram at Sam_Sorbo, Facebook, the Sam Sorbo official Facebook page. You'll want to stay in touch with her because the kinds of things she's saying are really, it's important to hear. She's going to give a perspective that you're not going to hear a lot of other places. And so grateful for you being part of the Dr. Jeff Show today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan Dobson from the Rebel Parenting Podcast. When my parents, Jim and Shirley Dobson, sent me to the Summit Ministries Worldview Conference when I was 17, we had no idea the impact it would have on my life. It changed me so much in 2 short weeks, I've returned every summer for 34 years. This summer, your student can attend an in-person conference. That's right, in person. Summit Ministries Worldview Conference challenges students ages 16 to 24 to think deeper about their convictions and their faith by engaging with today's top worldview thinkers and apologists. Can you imagine in person with other students learning about the Christian worldview? If not, they can attend Summit's virtual experience, and it's amazing. Change your student's life forever by partnering with Summit Ministries Worldview Conference today. Find out more by clicking the link in the show notes.